Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the reticle on this $450 scope from Primary Arms. This is the SLX 1 through 10 by 28, right? So it goes from 1 power all the way up to 10 power. It's a 20 by 28, so it's a 34 millimeter tube, right? So it's a little bit bigger than your standard 30 millimeter tubes, which is important when you're ordering this. Make sure you get the 34 millimeter rings. Okay, so this was $450 with the mount, with the scope mount. It came out to $550. Okay, it has an excellent reticle with a lot of great detail here. That's really on par with what you find on more expensive scopes. This one over here, this is the Primary Arms M8 Raptor. This is a $1,500 scope, and then with the mount, it's $1,600. So this has, a whole bunch of, basically it has all the same information that you see here. So the great thing about this scope, right, it has all this great information for range estimating, for wind holes, that you can take this $450 scope to like an advanced, distance shooting class, and you can kind of keep up with people, right, that have, like $2,000 and $3,000 scopes, right? Because you've got all that information in there, and that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. How about the reticle, only information that's in there that allows this budget scope, right, $450 budget scope, to really punch like way above its weight class. Okay, it really, I'm really able to almost like it's almost on the heels of this $1,500 scope, and in some categories, right, it does better. In the last video that I did, I was looking at 100 yards, what can you actually see in the glass, and I was looking at the bullet, 22 caliber bullet holes in paper, and the cheaper $450 scope was actually beating out the more expensive $1,500 one, even though it's got Japanese glass and all that's, basically it's got premium glass. The fact that this is a 10 power, okay, versus that over there being an 8 power, the 10 power gave me, allowed me to see the bullet holes at 110 yards more clearly than the more expensive scope did with the premium glass. Okay, so in this video, we're going to be talking about the reticle. Now, before we get into the reticle, let's take a look at the glass inside of the scope so you can see kind of what it looks like. All right, so that's what you're seeing. Now, pay attention to the walls of the scope, right? Kind of the scope ring over there, right? You can see how much of the scope you see. All right. Now, let's go. This is on the $450 scope. Okay, let's go down to the $300 one, right? So this is the Primary Arms acss. This is the first one that they came out with, or at least the first one that I got. All right, so where are you? All right, so pay attention to the walls over here. So you can see the walls of the scope. You can see how they're thicker, right? So when for that extra $150 that you pay, you've got, basically you've got a much better eye box, and you see a lot less scope. With this one, if I'm just a little bit off, sometimes it's hard to get into position, especially if I'm in the prone position. This scope at $300 is not very forgiving. Now, one of the nice things about the second focal plane is if you are in the shadow like I am right now, and you can see that reticle, left eye sees target, right eye sees reticle, you can get on target. Okay, so that aspect retains itself on this one, which is also second focal plane. So this one, when I'm shooting, it's a little bit easier to get into position. Even though I'm having a hard time right now behind the camera. All right, do I gotta zoom out? Oh, maybe. Yeah, there you go. I was a little too close. All right, so first of all, you can see how the walls of the scope are a little bit thinner on this. Okay. So for the extra $150, you see less of the scope walls, and also when you get behind this, it's easier to get yourself lined up. So so you can see, as if I go a little bit off, it's a little bit easier to get into position. All right. All right. Now also with this, if you look at the spine that goes down of the mill grid, That also is very helpful into guiding you up towards the center, and also the lines that come in from the sides also help guide you to the center. Okay, so it's so far, like, my opinion is that it's definitely worth it to pay the extra $150 instead of getting this one over here. You know, the original acss. It's worth it to pay the extra $150 and upgrade to this one over here. And the other nice thing is that this has a really nice throw lever, whereas with this one you have to pay an extra $30 for that throw lever. Okay, so that's this throw lever is a lot nicer to work with. Okay, so that's an additional expense that I had on this one, having to pay the extra $30 for the throw lever. Okay, now let me take you up to the $1,500 scope, so just so that we can get an idea of what's the difference. Okay, so with this one, as you get behind it, all right, so you can see how the walls of the scope almost disappear, right? You see a really thin wall. Now this one's a first focal plane, so when you zoom in, you're not just zooming in on your target, but you're also zooming in on your reticle, and you start seeing more information. So you see something different on the reticle in 1 power, and you see something different as you zoom in. Let me move my hand up here. Okay, so now as I zoom in, you can see how information, you know, the details of the reticle start to become visible. Okay. So again, the walls of the scope still very thin once you position yourself correctly. Zoom back out. And then as you zoom out, basically you see a duplex reticle. Actually, this one didn't have the light. There you go. Put the illumination on so you can see it with the illumination. As you zoom in. So when you zoom out, the horseshoe in the middle becomes really thin. Even with the illumination on, you're basically kind of depending on those thick posts, the German 4-posts basically on the sides, or the duplex posts, to guide you to the center. That's what's going to get you on target with this. As far as like working in 1 power and being able to get on target faster, second focal plane is better. Okay, if that's your sole goal, being able to get on target faster, the second focal plane over here is going to allow you to do that, because you're going to see the same reticle here at all magnifications. The only problem with this is that the value in the reticle, right, the mils and all the measurements, they only hold their value when you're in max magnification. So right now that I'm in 1 power, none of that's accurate. The only thing that's accurate is the tip of the chevron, you know, being on target, and then the horseshoe around it, you know, will kind of get you on target. You know, that's like, you know, you can put your horseshoe around whatever you want to shoot. Okay, so let me show you over here what the reticle looks like. Okay, so you've got, let me get a pen here. So first of all, let's talk about, you got this mill grid here, right? And I was curious to know what the value of these things were on the side over here as well, because they're not clearly marked. So that's 15 mils from here to there, and basically I took a measurement there, and then I applied that measurement to the sides over here, like this and like that, and I can see that that's even. So that's how I was able to figure out that from the tip of the chevron all the way out, that's 15 mils. From here to there, that's 15 mils. And what I did is I sent an email to Primary Arms customer service, and they confirmed that this is 30 mils going all the way across. Okay, now that's really useful, because this reticle allows us to do a lot of things as far as range estimating. Now you might say, well, why can't we just use a range finder? Okay, well, 2 reasons. 1, you may not have a range finder. Number 2, when you're using a range finder, you're sending out a signal that can be tracked back to your position. Okay, so in some cases you may not want to use a rangefinder, and so this is the next available option. Okay, so the nice thing about having 15 mils top to bottom here and 30 mils all the way across over here, is we can range estimate objects, large objects. And the larger the object that you're milling is, the more likely that you're going to be accurate. So for example, if you're measuring a tractor trailer, okay, so all tractor trailers are about 75 feet long, okay. Okay, when your tractor trailer fits from here to there, right, it's at 833 yards. Okay, now you can also measure, because 800 yards, that might be a little bit too far. You might, well, you know, here's the thing: the trailer part itself is usually 55 feet. All right, so at 30 mils from here to there, that's 610 yards. So roughly 600 yards. If your trailer from there to there fits perfectly inside of this, you're at 600 yards. Okay. Now we can also do the height using this grid over here. So all tractor trailers are about 13.5 feet tall. Okay, so when your tractor trailer from tires to the top is 15 mils, okay, your truck is at 300 yards. Okay, when it's at 10 mils, so if it measures from here to, because that's from here to there, that's 10 mils, right? If it measures that tall, it's at 450 yards. And if it measures 7 mils from here up to there, okay, now it's at 650 yards. Okay, so this gives us the ability to range estimate things like known objects besides just humans, right? So as far as humans go, you have this I think they call it a range auto finder on the side. So basically you would range estimate the total height of a man. So if he stands this tall over here, he's at 500 yards. If he stands this tall, he's at 400 yards. This one here. If he stands this tall, he's at 400 yards. If he stands this tall, he's at 300 yards. But if let's say you're only seeing him from the belt up, right? So you put this on his belt line here. So from here to the top of his head, well, now you know that's at 300 yards, right? Same deal here. If he's, let's say, if his belt is here and his head comes up to there, you know he's at 400 yards. So you can range estimate the height of a man and also half of his height. And you can also range estimate the width of his shoulders on these lines over here. So that's 400 and that's 500. So you got two lines over here for range estimating the width of his shoulders. And also I think from here to there he's at 300, right? If he's between the horseshoes. So we can range estimate both humans, and we can use this mill grid over here to range estimate objects. Okay. Now the other great thing about this mill grid is that we can use this to communicate. Now, not just the mill grid, but also this up here, because for example, let's say we're at 500 yards over here, right? That's the 500 yard. That's where I would be holding if I was going to be shooting something at 500 yards. Well, let's say I want to tell somebody, well, 2 mils over there might be something behind that rock. I can say, hey, from this point, let's say I put this on a rock and I say, hey, look, 2 mils over to the right. I can communicate to somebody how many mils over I want somebody to look, or I can use this larger thing over here, right, which goes way across. So this is 30 mils from here to there. Now it can get a little confusing because of this dead area. Because in here you got your dots for runners, right? That's your walkers, that's your joggers, and that's your runners for leading targets. Okay, but as far as being able to communicate, this is sort of a dead area, but not really if you know how to use this. So from here to there, you got 15 mils. So over here, I've got it numbered. So this line over here is 1. Then there's a little line in there that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right. So basically the big lines basically skip 2 mils. Okay, so it's like a 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Okay, or going from the other direction, because basically like from here to there is 15 mils. So you can either go this way or you can go that way. So from here I can start, let's say, on 15, right, and I can count in. That's 15. That's 13, 11, 9, 7. Okay, and then it can get a little bit confusing once you get into that, because over here you can pick up the 5 So then it just becomes a question of where the 6 is. If I'm going to be working in that 6 to 10 range, I would just work down over there, right? So I would measure, because basically that's 7 right there, and that's 8. So basically you got to shift this image around to get yourself in the optimal position so that you can communicate with other people. So you could put that spot there on the rock, and then say, hey, I want you to look 4 mils over to the right and tell me what you see over there, right? Or from there, if there's a rock here, you can say, hey, look 5 mils down. You can get them to there. So this is great for communicating with other shooters. Whether you're going to be shooting at something or just observing something. This has a great deal of information in that. Now, one of the other things, and this is in the book, right? I looked through the book because there's lines on the top over here and there's lines on the bottom, okay? So these are your half mils on the bottom, okay? That they left that out in the book. They didn't tell you that. They didn't give you the value. First of all, they didn't give you the value of this whole thing going across. I had to measure it myself with the calipers, and the nice thing is I can use the bottom here, right, and then apply that to the top, and I can see that they match up. So I can see that that's 50 mils there, and then I can also take measurements because once you got a mil grid, I mean you got a measuring tool, so I can see that that's 1 mil there, and then I was able to measure that there, and I can see that this is 1 mil from here to that line on the top here. And again, once I had this information, I was able to confirm this with the Primary Arms customer service. Took them a few days to get back to me, but they gave me the confirmation I needed. And on the bottom over here, you got half mils. Okay, so you got full mil counts on the top. Oops, let's get this thing back into position here. There. So on the bottom side here, you got half mil counts. So you can really fine tune it. And the nice thing is if you got so that's 1 mil, that's a half, that's a full mil. If you got the half mil, then you can also go in between, right? So you can get all the way down to a 1/4 mil accuracy using these markers over here. So that can allow you to get really, really accurate with this. Now, one of the things that I noticed is that in the directions that came with this, they give you a little dot here underneath the chevron. That's a misprint because it doesn't actually exist in the scope. Okay, when you zoom in, where are you? Okay, it's not there. Let me turn off the illumination on this thing. Okay, so when you zoom in on this, that dot underneath the chevron is not there. So that's a misprint. Okay, so this dot doesn't exist. Okay, so that would have been because that's you're zeroing in on 100 there, then they're telling you that dot there's 250, and then that's 300. That's not there. This dot's not there. Okay, so you're gonna have to kind of. I mean, it's really not an issue. I mean, there's just such a small difference, practically speaking, that you're not gonna miss it. Now, one of the things worth noting is these directions are in meters. And I have no idea why they decided to do this thing in meters when everybody else uses yards. Almost all ranges in the United States are marked in yards. So I don't know why they did this in meters, but they did. So they want you to zero in at 100 meters. You know what? I'm going to zero in at 100 yards. I'm pretty sure everything else is going to fall into line or pretty close to line. If you zero in yards, I think 100 meters is 110 yards. So it's small. It's certainly at close distances it doesn't make a difference. I think 500 meters is 550 yards. Okay. So again, if you zero in at 100 yards, I think the rest of that should fall into place. If nothing else, what I would do is. If it becomes an issue, what I would do is I would get my initial zero at 100 yards, then go out to the maybe the 400 meters, and if anything, readjust there. So then if I readjust at 400 yards on that line, I think that all the numbers after that should kind of fall into place. So that's what I'm kind of planning to do with that. So this is an excellent reticle. I mean, you can take this. You can take this to an advanced distance shooting class where people have much more expensive scopes, and using a reticle like this, you can kind of keep up. Okay, now as far as the wind holes, right? Because you got a mill grid here, you don't have wind dots. But here's the thing, that's not a problem, because all you gotta do is just memorize a few numbers here. So what I usually do is just memorize the 10-mile-per-hour wind holes, and then like for 5 miles per hour, I cut these values in half, or for 20 miles per hour, I double them. So at 300 yards, if you got a 10-mile-per-hour wind that's coming straight across, right? So that's a full value wind. That's a half mil hold. At 20 miles per hour, that's a 1 mil hold. Okay, that's at 500 yards, my 10-mile-per-hour full value wind hold is 1 mil. 20 miles per hour, it's 2 mils. At 700 yards, my 10-mile-per-hour wind hold is 1.5 mils. At 20 miles per hour, it would be 3 mils. So basically, I would memorize these numbers here, and then you could work off of this using the mill grid. And if you got a wind that's coming in diagonally, you cut it in half. So it's really easy to work with. Okay. In fact, if you have a choice between only having wind holes in your reticle or only having a mill grid, I think you want the mill grid, because with the mill grid, this allows you to do a lot, both range estimating and communicating. Okay, whereas if you only have wind holes, the only thing you can do with that is just use the wind holes, right? It's really hard to do the other two things with it. You can't measure with wind hole dots. You can't communicate with wind hole dots unless the other person has an identical scope. So if you got a mill grid, you're able to kind of do everything. You can once you memorize these numbers here, you can use your mill grid to do your wind holes. Now, ideally, you want to have a mill grid that also has the wind holes in there, like slightly larger or in the line. That's kind of hard to do in a scope that only goes up to 8 power. And its second focal plane, because it's also hard to do in the first focal plane scope, like this one over here, that only goes up to 8 power. Because what happens is, if it only goes up to 8 power, basically the most you can zoom in is that 8 power, and things get kind of cluttered. If you have a scope that goes up to, let's say, 25 power, as you zoom in deeper and deeper, things kind of get spread out. So on a scope that has a greater that has greater magnification, you can have both wind holes and wind holes and the mill grid in there. But on a scope that only goes up to 8 power, you kind of have to choose between one or the other. And if you got to choose between one or the other, I would go with the mill grid. Okay, because the mill grid is going to allow you to do both communicating and range estimating, whereas you can't do it if you only have the wind holes. Okay. So I think like I said, this is a video that's meant to focus on this reticle, on this acss Griffin m10s reticle 10x. Okay, and like I said, this is a 34 millimeter tube. So make sure you get 34 millimeter rings. Now, I have not seen this scope available. Like Optics Planet has been showing this unavailable for a couple of months now. I ordered it directly from Primary Arms. I had to wait a couple of weeks to get it. So and like I said, let me say this: as far as like the scope that I would recommend, this is the scope I would recommend to the people that I train. And I'm really coming at this from the perspective of what scope do I recommend to people that I'm training, right? Because I'm not doing this video review so I can get clicks. I don't get paid by the click. I don't get paid by Primary Arms. I train people. And so when people come to me, I want to be able to recommend a scope that's both affordable, because it's really hard for me to tell people, go get yourself a $1,500 scope like this, okay? But it's a lot easier for me to tell them to get this $450 scope. And also for me as the trainer, a lot of times if people need me to lend them a rifle, I don't mind lending out a $450 scope on a rifle versus this one here, right? Versus the $1,500 one. I'm less inclined to rent out a $1,500 scope. Okay, so that's why I think that this comes in at a very important price range. And also, I'm also a big believer in having more guns rather than better guns, right? Because here's the thing, this palmetto over here, right? This palmetto rifle, the upper cost $350, the lower cost $150. So basically, this is a $500 rifle, right? And it's got a $550. I mean, it's a $450 scope, $100 for the mount. So basically, it's coming in somewhere about $1,000, right? Maybe $1,100. Okay, so to me, like and here's the thing, it's coming in at about $1,100, but this also shoots a half inch at 100 yards, right? So it's a half MOA rifle. Total package here about $1,000. And if I'd rather have a whole bunch of these that I can lend out to people, right? Either for training purposes, or let's say in a or let's say in a combat situation, right? I'd rather have more guns to lend out to people, and if the gun's shooting a half inch at 100 yards, I think it's plenty accurate, So there's no point. Not that I don't want to have more expensive stuff, because I got one right here, right? But if you've got, let's say, a combination of $3,000, right, scope and rifle, number one, you're not likely to want to lend it out. Okay. Number two, you're not going to be able to afford as many to lend out, and number three, you're not going to be willing to part from it, because in a realistic combat situation, you might need to to leave equipment behind, right? Especially if you need to, let's say, blend in to with other civilians, you may need to leave your equipment behind and abandon it. Well, you're going to be less likely to want to do it if you got one rifle scope setup that costs, let's say, $3,000, versus if your total setup is $1,000 and you've got 3 or 4 more back at your base location. So that's why I'm a big believer in having more guns rather than more expensive guns, especially when the cheaper guns are performing. And like I said, I was shooting this gun yesterday. I posted a video where I got a half inch at 100 yards. So the gun performs, the scope performs. So there are my thoughts on this. Again, the focus of this video was the reticle. One thing I do want to say is that they did make a major mistake in the print. Get this thing out. Major mistake in the print over here where they say auto live motion sensing. Okay, and I've seen it advertised that way on a couple of different websites. That's incorrect. This does not have auto sleep, shake awake. That's wrong. I spoke to Primary Arms twice about this, 2 separate people, and they confirmed that that's a mistake. Okay, which is a shame, because if this at $450, if this scope had the auto sleep, shake awake, I think they would have completely blew away the market. Because this is an excellent scope, has an excellent reticle. It gives you lots of excellent information that you can take to an advanced class, right? And you can do range estimating, win holes. You can even do shoot moving targets. You've got your movers here, right? You got your that's your walker, that's your jogger, and that's your runner over here. You can hold on those dots. But if you've got something, let's say that's like an animal you're tracking, or let's say if you're leading an animal or a vehicle, or the way I've done shooting moving targets is we set something up on the cart and we're rolling it down the side of a hill. So that's and trying to shoot that target. So that's now moving at an unknown speed. So the way you would lead something like that is you would basically use the mill lines over here, and you would count the seconds, like how many seconds, or even this, how many seconds does it take for it to get from here to here, or from here to here, and then you would use these markings here to count the seconds and lead it that way. Okay, so as long as you got things in your scope that are evenly spaced, and you can count the seconds between, you can hit moving targets. So this is the type of scope that you can take to an advanced class and work with other people that who have much more expensive scopes, and you can kind of keep up with them at this. So this is $450. You're going to pay about $100 for the mount, and I would definitely recommend getting like this, one of these primary arms, because if you're going budget, both the Reticle and primary arms. I've gotten several rifles from them that shoot 1 inch and better at 100 yards, and this one over here shoots a 1/2 inch at 100 yards. Okay, so let me know what you guys think about all this, how you like this reticle, and I'm going to be doing an overall review on this scope because I think it's such an awesome scope. Gives you lots of good information. Oh, one thing worth mentioning, since I'm looking at the turrets, again, we'll talk about more on the other one, but the turrets are in, basically when you adjust them, you can take the caps off, basically a 1/2 inch at 100 yards. They should have done this in mils, right? Because it's a mil grid. So basically the turrets and the reticle are talking like two different languages, right? This one's talking MOA, this one's talking mils. This one over here, they did it right on the $1,500 one because the adjustments here are in mils, and the markings in the reticle are also in mils. So that's one of the things that's a little but you know what, it's on the budget scope. I can understand why they did that. These markings that they have over here are kind of worthless because that's not going to stay. I mean, you can kind of, like with your nail, you can spin this around to reposition this. However, if you're shooting this on the vibration, these markings are going to move, so that's not very useful. But one of the things also worth mentioning is, like, this is a scope that you're gonna basically zero in at 100 yards, and you're not gonna be dialing turn, because here's the thing, with this one over here, when you're turning this one, right, on the $1,500 one, it's the clicks are very audible, right, and they're very tactile. You can feel them. Okay, with this one over here, not so audible, not so tactile. I mean, you can feel it under, like, if it's quiet out, you can feel it, but if it's noisy, if other people are shooting, if you got gloves on, you're not going to be able to feel the clicks or hear the clicks. Okay, so that's why with this, you're going to zero this in at 100 yards, cap it, and then only use the reticle for your holdovers and your wind adjustments. Whereas with this one over here, I kind of want to do the same because it doesn't have like a button. Like if you start, because here's the thing, what I've been doing with this one over here is, if I'm shooting, let's say, like I have this zeroed in with a 77 grain Sierra Match King at 100 yards, but if I put in a 22 conversion bolt, basically I adjust this 4 clicks up, right? So from there I can it's very tactile. I can go up 4 clicks, and right there I know that now that my 22 long rifle is zeroed in. Okay. And then what I can do is, if I want to go back to shooting 5.56 with the 77 grains, I'm able to come straight down, and I can kind of get that. I can get that perfect, right? I can get back to a 0 over there, because this is all. I can remove this. This is adjustable, So that's something that you can do on the $1,500 scope. You can't do that so well on the $450 scope. Because you can hear it, you can feel it. So that's kind of one of the differences that you get for the extra money over here. Now what I also found is, even with this one, if you do it enough, you're gonna get confused, because sometimes you forget. Like if you start adjusting for different calibers, sometimes you forget which way you went. And there was one time where I went like completely the opposite way. So the best way to use this one as well is just to zero in at 100 yards and then just use your reticle. But that's definitely what you want to do with this one over here. Zero in at 100 yards, just use your reticle for your, for different ranges, and then for your wind holes and all that stuff. Okay, so thanks for watching, and be on the lookout for the overall review that I do on this scope. It should be out in a couple of days. And like I said, I'm pretty much shooting this every day. Not just this one, but also the other two, so I can get a comparison between these, and it's good because I got them at 3 different price ranges, right? I got the $300 one here, I got the $450 one in the middle, and I got the $1,500 one all the way here on the right. So I'm really able to compare, at the different prices. And right now I can tell you guys, this is a great value. I mean, it's better than the $300 one, and it gets up pretty close to the $1,500 one. So this is where your best value is going to be. I'll talk to you all soon.